In case I don't see ya. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Yeah.
What happens to Truman once he walks out of that door? It's a question I've asked myself every single time I've watched The Truman Show. The Truman Show is such an impeccably made film. It's a commentary on media, it's a commentary on advertising, a commentary on holidays and the experience of being stuck in one for a long, long time. But it's also the experience of being trapped, the experience of claustrophobia, of fake friendships, of fake parentships, and ultimately the desire to leave a world that you don't belong in. I think The Truman Show is such a multifaceted movie, and it's such an experience every single time I watch it, because there's always something new that I notice, or some detail that I missed the first time I spotted it. So I wanted to do a whole video where I just looked into what I thought happened to Truman once the cameras were off him. So let's talk about some of the endings to The Truman Show and what I think is possible happened to him once he walked through that door.
You want another slice?
No, I'm okay.
What else is on?
Yeah, let's do what else.
Where's the TV guy?
Ending 1. Nobody cares. Really? That's an ending? Okay. Well, this was a very short video essay, everyone. Thank you for coming, and I guess I'll see you next time. Feels a little bit unsatisfying, doesn't it? The idea that this man, this 30-year-old man who has spent the last 3 decades growing up in front of a captive television audience around the world, can walk out that door and the rest of his life he isn't bothered by anyone. No one approaches him. Nobody asks him how he's doing or if he's okay. He just lives the rest of his life. Nothing notable happens. It just doesn't seem like an ending to me. But maybe that's the point. Maybe he did live the rest of his life without anything happening. Maybe he just continued to exist and died of old age. Maybe the real ending of The Truman Show is that there is no ending after all. We'll never know. Personally speaking, I don't think this is the canonical ending of The Truman Show. Or at least, I don't think that's what happened to him after he left the show. The not an ending also kind of raises a lot of questions, like, what was the point of the show? If Truman was merely going to leave and then be left alone for the rest of his life, did no one try and stop him and talk to him? Nobody sought out him and thought he was okay? What about his love interest in the show? Is his name really Truman? Did he not have questions about why he was picked for the show and how many people watched and even who his real friends and parents are? Truman would have a lot of trust issues stemming from that show. It just seems very unlikely to me that the Truman Show ends and he just lives the rest of his life with no problems whatsoever. I think there's more than that. So, to wrap up this ending, I don't think no one would care. I think some people would care. And it's the ways in which they would care that is most interesting to me.
Good morning, Truman.
Morning, Truman.
Hey, how are you guys?
Beautiful day, isn't
Oh,
it?
always.
And how's your lovely wife?
Good.
Ending 2. Truman leaves the show and becomes a celebrity. Truman leaves the show and is suddenly surrounded by fans and producers of the show. They're clapping Truman. They say, "Well done, mate. Congratulations, you made it out." He gets taken away on a limo and then driven to some apartment, and he's welcomed by his true family and his actual friends. They're like, "Oh my God, Truman, you did so well." And then his love interest is there. She's like, "Oh my God, Truman." And then they hug and they kiss, and Truman's having a great time. And then he goes on like all these talk show circuits and talks about how much he loved being on the show. He probably does his own commercials as well. And he lives like this amazing life and dies happy. dies absolutely milking the show for all it's worth and becomes a celebrity, and everyone loves him until the end of his life, basically. The Truman becomes a celebrity and loves his life ending is a happy one, and it is probably likely that he would become a celebrity. I mean, the man is very, very famous, and as we see at the end of the film, has a lot of fans, has a love interest to go to, and live the rest of his life with. He could probably make a travel show about how he finally gets to Fiji. But
You can't get any further
it's not
away
realistic
before you
again.
start coming back.
But this time it's the opposite problem. Everyone cares about him, and he lives a perfect life again. He would be suspicious, right? It's all going a bit too well for him. So, in conclusion, I think he becomes a celebrity is likely, but I think there's more to it than that.
I think Truman Show is something that exists on a micro level now. You know, it was kind of a story about that on a macro level, but now everybody has a subscriber channel, you know, and everybody has their own little Truman Show world.
Before I get to what I consider to be the third ending and the most realistic one, I think we need to take a step back here. What is celebrity culture? What does it mean to be a celebrity in this day and age? If The Truman Show is a film about a man whose every moment, from beginning to the end of when he leaves the show, was filmed, taped, recorded, and broadcast, doesn't that just sound like what we currently have today? Let's get into a bit more detail. See, around the time that the film was made and released in 1998, the internet was really beginning to take off in the 90s. And particularly that year is interesting because we are just years away from the millennium and 2001 and every single thing that came after it. And this is in the heydays, the early days of social media. I know it's a bit like talking about water and food at the moment, but you just have to stop and think that, like, back in 1998, things like internet blogs, even this YouTube video, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, none of that existed. It all came about because of the invention of the internet. And everything that has sort of since transpired then has resulted in a celebrity culture that is 24/7. If I wanted to know the latest news about Jim Carrey, for example, I can just easily search him, and the latest interview that he did will pop up on Google. And I'll get into this a little bit later on in the video, but it would be interesting to think about what would have happened to Truman if the internet had existed within the world of The Truman Show. Would he have found out about it a lot sooner? But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's wind it back a bit. I guess there's two ways to look at this. As a movie filmed in 1998 or through the lens of 2021. What would have happened in 1998 if he left the show? Well, we know that social media and the internet is just coming into form now, so there probably would have been online forums talking about the Truman Show, and Truman himself would still become a celebrity. But I have to wonder if he would be as much of a celebrity as he would be in 2021. Because, you know, newsflash, nowadays, people kind of film themselves all the time. There are countless long 10-hour videos or streams on Twitch of people playing video games, doing activities, making online communities with their fan base, and they sort of grow over time. Some of these people have been on the internet and being personalities for over 10 years. The idea that a TV show about filming an entire person's life who doesn't know they're being filmed in 2021 isn't really that big of a deal now. I mean, ethically, there are a lot of questions, and we'll get into those, believe me, but nowadays, everybody's got a Truman Show. Technically, by me talking to you about this is my Truman Show, and I am the star. think there's two final points to be made before I move on to this next ending. The first is that technology has evolved so much since 1998 that the mere invention and the existence of smartphones make the idea of the Truman Show obsolete. I can record this video, I can edit this video, I can record the audio of this video all on my phone right now. And that ability to create that content alone kind of just suggests to me that investing all of that money and all of that time into the actors, the set production, everything that went into the Truman Show was a waste of time. You could have just done it all on a phone. The other thing that is really important here is reality TV. Just 2 years after the Truman Show was released, a little show called Survivor began. And then American Idol began, and then The Voice came out, and then Dallas Truckers, Ghost Hunters, American Casino, American Hot Rod, Scariest Places on Earth, Big Brother, The Ashley Simpson Show, This Is Your Life, I Married a Princess, My Life on the D-List, My Fair Brady, The Simple Life, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Courtney and Kim Take New York, Crikey, It's the Irwins? I haven't heard of that show. There's so many reality TV shows right now that there's an entire Wikipedia page just dedicated to all of them, and they're around the world as well. And it's interesting too, because as reality TV has sort of evolved over time, there's definitely been an argument that they're actually not real. There's questions of things being staged, things being scripted, people being put in situations that don't really happen in real life. People kind of rig favourites to win. People rig the underdog to win. Some people cheat. Some people lip sync. Some people just make up who they are and falsify their identity. Reality TV itself is accused of being fake. Does that sound like a movie I'm talking about right now? In many ways, The Truman Show is the encapsulation of reality TV. And the sad reality too is that when a lot of people leave reality TV shows, they end up not doing very well. Sometimes they become mentally ill. Sometimes they sue the shows that they were on for their awful depictions if they were a villain. So that leads me into ending 3.
Let me get you some help, Truman. You're not well.
Why don't you let me fix you some of this new Mococo drink? All natural cocoa beans from the upper slopes of Mountain Nicaragua, no artificial sweeteners.
What the hell are you talking about? Who are you talking to?
Before continuing much further, I'd like to issue a warning. The following topic deals with a lot of mental health issues. If this is something that you're sensitive to, please skip ahead to this time code. In a lot of ways, I wish I didn't have to talk about this topic. I'd rather just keep this video light and fluffy and talk about all the funny things that could happen when Truman leaves the show. But realistically speaking, being on television for 30 years and realising it was all a facade, it was all fake, that would have a huge impact on your mental health. The parents that loved him and raised him as a child, they weren't his real parents. The best friend that he confided in for hours and hours on end was just pretending and being fed lines. The woman that he married wasn't his real love interest after all. Every single person that Truman knew was acting. They weren't who they said they were. The story of the Truman Show is actually quite dark when you really get down into it. When Truman was a baby, he was left by his parents because they couldn't raise him. So he was chosen to be on the show as a matter of good timing, and was closely controlled throughout his whole life. One of the key plot points of the movie is the fact that the directors and producers of the film wanted to instill in Truman a fear of water because he could easily sail away and try to escape from the show. So what do? They faked his dad's death. They made it pretend like his dad drowned and Truman was on the boat at sea. So that entire last 30 minutes of the movie, where he's trying to sail away and they're throwing all the rough weather and seas at him, and he's trying to escape and they nearly drown him.
Give me some lightning.
Again. Hit him again.
Because they're going to lose their prophet, their main character. They don't see Truman as a human being. They see him as a means to advertise, to keep products going, to keep the show and everyone on the show employed and producing and keeping making content for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
God's sake, Chris. The whole world is watching. We can't let him die in front of a live audience.
He was born in front of a live audience.
In my opinion, the most pivotal line of the Truman Show comes right at the end, just before he walks out the door. Christoph is telling him that the world out there is no better than the one that was in the Truman Show. And we'll get to that in a second. But Truman is standing there and he says,
I know you better than you know yourself.
Never had a camera in my head.
no matter what actions he did, no matter who he spoke to and how he spoke to them, no matter how weirdly or strangely or normally he behaved, his thoughts were always his own. This was the genuine, true part of Truman Burbank. The fact that he could think whatever he wanted to. He was always free to believe what he wanted to believe, as long as his thoughts were his own. There was never a camera in his head. There was never anyone controlling him and controlling his mind. And that independence is the key message of the film. And the thing is, throughout the film, we see what kind of impact this has on a person when they're stuck in this fake reality TV show and there's no way for them to escape. He literally holds his fake wife, Meryl, at knife point.
Do something!
And she's screaming for help.
Please do anything, please stop!
And someone had to come and save her.
How can anyone expect me to carry on under these conditions? It's unprofessional!
Are we sure this is a comedy film? Are we sure this is funny? And I think we have to mention too that end point where he sails and he hits the wall and he just breaks down. The wall is, it's a physical wall, but it's also the mental wall. He has tried everything to break from the monotony, break from the normalcy the same day that he was having on the show. The moment that Truman walks through that door is a moment of freedom. And sure, the fans and his real-life love interest, I guess, are all there to greet him. But he is walking out that door with so much baggage from the last 30 years. The realization that everything that he just lived through wasn't real. Will he find his real parents? Will he make real friends in society? Can he do that now? There's just so many questions about how a man could live normally after everything that he went through. He would have a lot of trauma. He would probably get PTSD anytime he saw an advertisement that seemed to be just directed at him. The man would have trust issues for the rest of his life. So, I don't have the answer for what would happen if Truman became paranoid. I definitely hope that Truman would be able to get mental help and be able to somehow live the rest of his life with a little bit of doubt and a little bit of, sort of questions in his own mind about what is real, what is not real, who can I trust, that sort of thing. But I'm not a mental health expert, and I have no answer for this question. It's just sad. Ending 4. Truman sues the show once he leaves.
Incidentally, I believe Truman is the first child to have been legally adopted by a corporation.
That's correct.
Once you translate that to film, as I said to Andrew in conversation, I said, firstly, you've got logic problems. We have to answer the logic, at least within the fantasy, has to all work.
Truman might have been pushed by the Free Truman campaigners, and yes, there were Free Truman campaigners, into suing the company for a large amount of the profit that made off his life. But considering he was legally adopted by the corporation as a baby, I don't know how successful that would have been. Perhaps they would have just settled to avoid a PR battle that they would have lost in the media and agreed to give Truman a cut of any future merchandise sales. Either way, Truman's celebrity status would have probably provided for him in some way. Endorsements, sponsorships, that kind of thing. A real-world insurance company would probably pay a lot of money for him to be their public face. But there's another legal question here. What happens to the production company? With the show abruptly ending, what do? That's thousands of people suddenly potentially out of work, and a big gap in the world's entertainment landscape appearing overnight, specifically in 1998. There must have been at least one channel dedicated to 24-hour coverage, and maybe daily or weekly highlight shows on another network. Did the executives scramble to put pressure on Christoph to start a new TV show? Networks always like to see more of the same, but as we've talked about, reality TV shows are just starting to come into play now, so would The Truman Show have really worked? And also, we know from the last shot of the film that viewers want to see what else is on. They want to see what's next, what's new. So, starting up again with a new child requires at least 10 or 20 years of development, of them going through childhood. Most of it's probably going to be the same thing. They would still probably lose a tooth. They would still probably find their first love. I'm just not sure it would work. And you know, I'm no legal eagle, but I'm pretty sure there's something called the California Child Actors Bill, which applies to child performers, designed to safeguard a portion of their earnings for when they enter adulthood. As it stands, money earned and accumulated under a contract under the code remains the sole legal property of the minor child. So any money that Truman has earned didn't actually come from him being an insurance salesman, but maybe they paid him properly through the TV. But he could still sue because technically he's bought by a company and he didn't get a say in that. And if he leaves the show, is he still owned by the company? Is he still their property? There's a lot of legal questions here. The production company could actually be a bit more clever than they appear to be, and they could easily fight off some of Truman's lawsuits. For example, he was paid for his performance, as we just talked about, and since the production company was his legal guardian, kidnapping might not stick. He could make a case for wrongful imprisonment, but the company would probably argue he was free to go any time, as evidenced by his departure. Even if he didn't get any money from the show or merchandising, he could all filmed unknowingly and being caught in an environment that he didn't know how to escape until the last 2 years of his life, when he escaped the show. So those 4 endings are the ones that I consider to be the main endings of The Truman Show. But let's get into some of the smaller ones and definitely the weirder ones. Truman leaves the show and is immediately hit by a bus. Well, I mean, the traffic was planned around him and all the drivers were especially on the lookout for him, so his crossing habits are probably pretty garbage. So it makes sense that he'd leave the show and then, bam, hit by a bus. Moving on, leaves the show, but it's 2020 and he gets the coronavirus and dies. Oh. Truman leaves the show and he becomes a famous actor, but he has to change his name. His new name? Jim Carrey. I mean, this kind of makes sense. I guess Jim Carrey could have been the original Truman, but I feel like we would have known about that by now. And then the final ending. Truman leaves the show, finds Sylvia, and they finally go to Fiji, and they live happily ever after. No one bothers them, because the Truman Show wasn't shown in Fiji. They have no idea who he is. He just lives the rest of his life being content, being happy. Nothing else happens.
I often think, and I'm asked about like what I think would have happened to Truman when he goes outside the wall, and it took me a while to realize that basically he was alone out there too because everybody went back inside. They all wanted to be in the dome.
So there you have it. Those are all the endings of The Truman Show, and what I think happens to him once he leaves. Again, I want to re-stress how great a movie this is, that such an important film, and such a vague ending like this, opens up so many possibilities for a character. Truman Burbank really is all of us. We are all in our own Truman Show, one way or another, People are watching us, people are taking interest in what we do and how well we succeed or our failures and sympathising with us. It's such a unique and beautiful movie, and it's something that I really wanted to talk about for such a long time. So I want to thank you for sitting with me, and I encourage you to like this video and subscribe if you want to hear me talk about more movies in the future. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.